For those of you that have seen me, well, I've been kicking around in the Agile community since, well, 2001. For those of you that have seen me around, I'm known for coining the term story mapping, or it's hard to call it an invention because, well, when I came up with it, I thought it was an invention. I started spraying cards out on the floor in a shape that told a story about the way our product works, and I thought this was a great idea. I told other people about my great idea, and they said, well, yeah, we kind of do something like that too. That's when I learned that, well, it's kind of a pattern, and lots of other people do it, and I'm lucky enough to have given the pattern a name. Maybe in way of short self-introduction, I've been in software development about 20 years. I am an art school dropout. If you're an art school dropout and become a software developer, at least in my company, that made me the UI person. If you're a UI person, well, basically I could design user interface that sucked less than other developers' user interface. And because I could talk to customers and users without embarrassing my company as much as other developers, that eventually made me a product manager. And very early on I learned, well, that good UI doesn't mean good software, just like well-formatted code doesn't mean good code, that there's a lot more to it than that. And so in the Agile community, I've been a squeaky wheel or a loud voice for the inclusion of good product practice and user experience practice. And, well, that's where this practice of story mapping comes from. And I spent a lot of time teaching people a lot of cool techniques that help them be more product-centric and more user-centric with their products, but I realized that it actually doesn't work. It doesn't matter. And what I keep finding out over and over is I will teach people cool new ways to do things, and for some people it really works well. For some people they'll adopt a practice like story mapping or, well, a lot of other things that I'll teach, and it makes a big difference. But for others, they'll try it, and it doesn't make any difference at all. And this concerns me. Now, this is a guy named Mark. I was working with a company in Austin, and I'd been working. I ran a workshop there, and about 9 months later, I came back and ran another workshop there, and I talked with Mark, and I said, how are things going? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And what's working? And he said, well, all those techniques are sort of useful, but at the end of the day, they don't matter that much. But he said, what really matters a lot are all these little things that we did in the context of, well, we did them during the workshop, and you kind of helped us remember that it was all these little things that we do every day that matter most. And how many of you are using Agile practice today in the way you work? If you're not, why are you here? Look, I've been working with Agile development since the term Agile was coined, starting with an extreme programming project in 2000. The term Agile was coined in 2001. Anybody been in Agile longer than 5 years in the room? Anybody longest 10 years or more? So a couple. How many of you think Agile has gotten really, really complicated? Yeah, please, that's what I was looking for. Today's Agile is messier and has more rules than it did when I started with this stuff. And it seems like the more rules we add to it, the worse it gets. And a reminder of an old axiom that adding more process to a broken process doesn't fix it. The rules that matter are those simple things that aren't there. So, look, I'm going to start with 9 that I know of and 9 that work for me. First, well, when I talk about user stories, I'll remind people that stories get their name not from how they're supposed to be written, but how they're supposed to be used. Stories, well, the word story refers to how we can talk with each other and, well, get on the same page through discussion. But one of the things I learned very early on is, well, discussion isn't enough, and documents aren't enough. It's well, when you and I talk and we talk about the same feature. We talk about code, we talk about our customers, we talk about UI. It's easy for us to imagine different things. It certainly happens when we read the same document. But it's when we take things out of our head, when I go a little bit further than talking, when I externalize my thinking, when I make it visible, that we start to see that what I'm thinking and what you're thinking are different. But it's not that I'm right and you're wrong. It's that we see we see the puzzle in different ways. It's when we start combining and refining how we see things, the real solution or a real understanding is kind of buried in the mixture of all those things. It's when we leave that kind of conversation. We may still say the same feature name, we may still refer to the same customer, but we leave with this intangible state of shared understanding. And it was a combination of words and pictures and discussion that got us there. And in most processes up until Agile development, we relied on a lot of shared documents. But shared documents, those aren't the same thing as shared understanding. Now, these days, in practicing Scrum, I see a lot of what is a backlog grooming session. Does anybody have those in their companies? So, this is an example of what not to do. When I watch a backlog grooming session, it usually starts with projecting something like Jira onto the wall, and usually there's a few people paying attention to what's going on, and most people aren't. And there's this belief that if you can use your smartphone under the table, it causes you to go invisible. And when I take pictures of people in backlog grooming sessions, I have a lot of these pictures, and I'm surprised at how many have people yawning in the pictures. Now, when we talk about building shared understanding, that's not what we're talking about. Building shared understanding looks a lot more like this. It looks it has a lot of gesturing, a lot of pointing, a lot of pictures, and, a lot less projecting of stuff onto screens. It's us talking, us explaining, and it's us paying attention to see if people are getting it. Again, when I look back through all my pictures of people really doing this well, when I see the residue of conversations, there's always a lot of hand drawing, always a lot of things written on whiteboards, and always, when I take pictures of people doing this stuff, always a lot of pointing and gesturing. It's a company called Atlassian that I will visit in Sydney at least once a year, maybe twice a year when I get down to Australia. Do people know who Atlassian is? Great, everybody does. Atlassian, or most people do. Atlassian makes something called Jira and something called Confluence. When I go into most Agile environments, I will see stuff all over their walls. But usually what I see in most Agile environments are things like task boards and burn down charts and the residue of doing Agile planning. But when I walk into Atlassian, I don't see any of that. Why would they put tickets and task boards on the wall? They've got Jira, but their walls are covered with stuff, and what I see on their walls are examples of the things that they do not put in Jira. And, the things that later might show up in Confluence as a photograph, but what's on the walls are the residue of them working with each other, trying to get on the same page about what this feature looks like and what it does. These guys are at a stand-up meeting. Now, most of the time when I see people at a stand-up meeting, there's the people in a circle talking about what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and what's holding them back. And, these guys are doing this a little bit differently. Sprayed out on the wall is the journey of a feature they're working on that they're trying to get out. What they're talking about and what they're pointing to is saying, I'm working over here, and I'm having trouble here, and I should wrap up today. And there's lots of pointing and lots of gesturing and lots of focusing on the product that we're trying to release, or at least the representation of it on the wall, and not a lot of focusing on Jira and the tickets. They'll write sticky notes, and someone will go back to Jira and maybe update some things if need be. But look, they're using Jira all day to move tickets around all day. If they're going to get together and talk, they're going to focus on the work they're trying to get done. It's a function of keeping your eye on the ball and not on the players. that's the way they work. Now, the stuff we build, the stuff we build while we're working together has the quality of a vacation photo. How many have heard me give this basic thing before? Anybody heard this before? Is this a new story? Sorry, you're going to hear it again. Look, to make this work, I've got to tell you about one of my vacation photos. Those are my daughters. We're on a beach in Hawaii. And if I were to share that with you, you could politely say they're cute and that looks like fun. And I noticed that I wish I would do a little work on the color on the photograph, make it look a little bit better. But look, when I see the picture, I remember this particular trip to Hawaii. And in this trip, we went to the Big Island of Hawaii. If you've been to the Big Island of Hawaii, the west side of the island is really dry and arid. It looks a lot more like Idaho than it does any place tropical. A lot of stuff that looks like desert and lots of volcanic rock. And every beach we went to was either really rocky, or if there was sand at all, it was covered with people. And all my kids wanted to do was swim in the hotel pool. Now, I spent way too much money to go swim in hotel pools. I found a beach on TripAdvisor, and it said it's really fabulous, not many people there, but it's a little hard to get to. What hard to get to translated to was over an hour's drive on a four-wheel drive trail, which is a bad idea in a rental Ford Mustang. And when we got there, there's a small parking lot, hardly anybody in the parking lot. I'm thinking, hey, this looks good. We get out of the car, and I'm looking for the beach, but there's no beach. There's a trail going off into the distance. The trail isn't a nice sandy trail. It's a rocky, volcanic rock trail. If you've got kids, you know how this is going. My kids are begging, can we just please go back to the hotel pool? And as any good father would, I told them, no, we're going ahead to the beach. When we got there, it was beautiful. There's hardly anybody on the beach. And, we had a great day. There are sea turtles up on the beach, lots of turtles in the water, because, look, there's not many people there to scare them off. There's more fish. There's lots of great open beach. And I'm not trying to sell you Hawaii, but the important thing is I remember all that because I was there, and you couldn't possibly know any of that because you weren't there. When these guys at Atlassian are looking back at what they've put on a wall or what they put on a board, there's a bit of information there, but there's a lot of information that you couldn't possibly know. If they were to translate everything that's there into a document, it would still be, pretty worthless. It's the people that are there that will know and will understand. Now, let me see if I can wrap this back up here. There's a mantra used for user stories. It's the card conversation confirmation mantra. And remind people that stories get their name from the way they're supposed to be used. And the idea is we write a card down, and then we show up and talk to somebody who can build this software. We explain what we're thinking of, and they'll listen. And if they were just listening, they might form a different picture in their head, but it's a conversation, and they can ask questions. And because it's a conversation with words and pictures, because it's a conversation focused on solving people's problems and building shared understanding, we bring into it things like UI prototypes and use cases and workflow models and whatever else we want to bring. Story doesn't mean you're not bringing anything else in. It means, we're working differently. At the end of that conversation, we arrive at a solution. We arrive at this state of shared understanding. Now, when things go horribly wrong in Agile development, it's often because, look, even if we did it right, we actually talked together, we got on the same page, and we produced a document. Or, think back to those, even if something good came out of that backlog grooming session and we got on the same page, the way it's supposed to work is if we've got to hand something off to someone, we hand it off with a conversation, but sadly the way it often works is we drop all that stuff into a ticket in Jira and hand it off, and the person goes back to reading kind of a crappy document or looking at your vacation photos, and it's not surprising they come up with something different. Effective collaboration is there to build shared understanding, and the best documents help us recall that conversation. Now, that'll be one of the longer points I make here, but look, it's not enough to just communicate with documents. It's not enough to just show up and talk. It's important to make your ideas visible, get them out there, let people see them. It's a small thing, but done a lot makes a big difference. Now, thing number 2 here is a lot of people think collaboration has a lot to do with talking, and what I've learned over time is that that's dead wrong. That in fact it's talking that gets in the way of us getting on the same page. These people are working together building a sticky note model. They're building one of these story map things. They're looking at it and they're moving things around. And oddly, when I watch people work doing this, that do this well, they kind of let the picture do the talking. They'll indicate one thing is more important than another by moving it above something else. They'll indicate something happens after something else by moving it to the right. There's a lot less discussion. In fact, it's discussion that kind of gets in the way. If you're using things on the wall, look, stop talking. Let your pictures do the work. And if they don't, then keep drawing. Organize your simple models to communicate ideas. And look, well, I didn't mention this, but a lot of you use Agile practices that have sort of a brainstorming phase where, well, we think of all the things that went well this sprint, or instead of brainstorming out loud, brainstorm quietly, write down all of your ideas, and then share all those ideas back. Which leads me to the next thing. Let me see if I can explain what I mean by flair. It is not that. Anybody seen Office Space before? Look, this is an example of, I'm not going to explain the Stanford D School's design thinking model, but what I'm going to explain about the model is there are lots of times when we're doing design thinking practice where we're not satisfied with just one idea. We want to come up with lots of ideas, and then we want to narrow down from those ideas. I'll call that a flair and a focus. And this is a quick illustration from the book Game Storming. That's a pretty good book on collaboration. It'll talk a lot about visualizing things. But hey, flaring there means coming up with a lot of ideas before we move on to something else. Common practice that I'll teach and work with people on is something called a design studio. This is the aftermath of one. This is where we've sprayed a lot of things out on the wall and talked about them and annotated what's best. The way this works is we make sure that we're on the same page about the problems we're solving, and then we'll give everybody a little bit of time to sketch their ideas independently. And we'll take anywhere from 5 minutes to as much as 30 minutes, and then we'll come back together and point and gesture and use words and pictures and share our ideas with each other. And, well, this is fun, but better than that, we get a lot of ideas out there so that when we do start solving problems, we're solving problems with a lot of people's ideas. I was talking about, the guy in the first part of this talk. Mark at their company, they use, anytime they get into a situation where where people start to argue, they've developed the habit of reaching for a timer and saying, okay, let's take 5 minutes. They'll set a timer for 5 minutes. Everybody backs up. Everybody takes 5 minutes to get their ideas out on paper. And then they take a minute and everybody shares their ideas back. And what they quickly realize is best solutions are a combination of all of their solutions. I've seen architects do this instead of, most architectural discussions I've observed usually involve a bunch of smart guys going into a room and everybody arguing until they get their way. And that takes a long time. But this flaring first thing and then focusing kind of helps. Deliberately widen your field of choices before making a decision. When arguing, stop. Take a few minutes. Get your ideas out. Combine them with everybody else's ideas. And, that next step is to focus. Now, focusing means we have to choose from all those ideas, but I found some old pictures of me at meetings, and one of the things we'll do going into any workshop is, time box it. I don't want to be in a room with people longer than 60 minutes, 90 minutes at the most, and I want to make sure that we've got goals. And when I look back at pictures that we've got on the wall, when we get off target, wow, it's hard to see with this projection, but there's a big P there. That's a parking lot. These days, I hate to call them parking lot, but when we get off topic, we'll move it to the wall. And sometimes instead of parking lot, we'll put feature ideas to discuss later or problems we've got to put into the next workshop. And on the table are, this odd thing. One of the tricks we used to use to stay on topic were these little signs, and one side would say tangent when we're off topic. That was a signal to say that we're not talking about what we came in to talk about. And sold is what we'll hold up a sign that says when people are, belaboring a point, going on and on about something, and yeah, we get it, let's move on. And we started with those signs, and one day we couldn't find the signs, and we sent somebody out and said, can you make some signs? And all they could find were styrofoam cups. They put them on the cups, and these had a nice effect because they're easy to find on the table. And then over time, we came up with things like sold and tangent and too much detail and the question mark and uninteresting details. And it's during these kinds of meetings, we'll use these things to keep pace, to keep momentum, to stay focused on what we're here to do, and then save putting it into Jira or putting into some system for later. I found that picture because there were some signs on the table there, and one of those signs said dork. It's likely me that had that card played on them. Look, when you're working together, focus, pay attention to what you came together for, and keep checking in on those outcomes, and time things out when things drift. Not in a slide, but look, when I work with people that are new to Agile development, they'll say, I hate Agile because of all the meetings. And when I talk to people that have been working with Agile development for a while and it's working for them, they will say, I love it because of all the collaboration. So meetings are what we call crap collaboration. If your collaboration is working, you may stop calling it meetings. Now, the other thing that makes this thing work is, I mentioned earlier, time box. Don't show up and spend a huge amount of time talking and talk till it's done. Set a short time box. And, have people here heard of something called the Pomodoro technique before? And yeah, the technique is named after a tomato-shaped kitchen timer. Came from people in Italy, and who would have ever thought that people in Italy have a hard time staying focused, but they do. The idea is that if I've got a goal, set a short time box, and look, if I have something that I think I can be done with in an hour, I don't set an hour time box, I set a 20-minute time box. At the end of 20 minutes, I need to stop, step back, look at how far along we are, and ask, are we making progress? It's a good time to take a head break, and then ask, how many more of these time boxes is it going to take? And a mantra that I like to use is to time box and satisfice. At the end of the time box, stop, reflect, and ask, is this good enough for now? If you haven't heard that word satisfice before, but it's a blend of satisfactory and sufficient, it's sort of an old word, not a new one, not a made-up one. But really it means good enough for now. When we're doing collaborative work, we want to work not until it's perfect, but until it's good enough. Now, when we're working together, another problem is just too many people, everybody wanting to be involved. Use less people. The ideal conversation is dinner conversation sized. Now, if you go out I went to lunch today with a friend, met him here, we ate, and we held a single conversation all during lunch. If you had a third person, it's pretty easy to hold a single conversation. If you had a fourth person, every once in a while it might break up into two conversations, but when you add a fifth or a sixth, it gets harder and harder to hold a single conversation. If we can focus our conversations on small, when you're pulling people together, pull small groups of people together. I find that if you've got 2 to 4 people, all we need is a goal and a time box. But if we've got a bigger group of people, we need somebody to kind of direct traffic. We need some facilitation structure sometimes. How many of you have heard of something called planning poker before? And yeah, if you're Agile practitioners, you know about that. And well, what makes planning poker work is the fact that it leverages a simple facilitation structure, gives us a way to have more people working together. If you've ever done planning poker, notice it also leverages that shutting up thing. If we all agree with each other, we don't talk about it. And we use the tool to avoid unnecessary conversation. If we've got lots of people, well, the best way to tackle that is to divide and conquer, break into small groups and merge our results back together. One thing I remember we used to do in Agile development in the old days is, well, during an iteration planning or sprint planning, as we call it today, we really did stop and talk about all the stories in detail and go into enough detail that we really understood them and broke them down into tasks and estimated them. Now, if I told you at the beginning of an iteration you were going to do that with every single story, for a lot of you today that would sound completely miserable. But it wasn't for us because, well, we broke into a lot of small groups. We said, okay, for the next 60 minutes, we're going to work on estimating these stories and really planning. We're going to break into small groups of 3 or 4. We'll talk about the details. We may shift a little bit. If you get bored of talking about this story, move to another one. And in the end, we'll stop and see how we're doing and come back together and share with each other where we came up with on every one of these stories. It felt a lot less like a meeting and a lot more like a workshop. If you want to make decisions fast, work in smaller groups. If you've got a crowd to manage, let them break up into smaller groups and share the work. Now, I've been talking a lot about a lot of simple collaboration things that help things go better. And I'm bridging off of what my friend Mark had told me, that it's all these little things that made a difference for us. All your big practices were interesting, but it's these little things we use every day that matter. Now, I'm going to shift to something. Look, when I ask product teams, when I ask product managers, when I ask people that are doing well, what is the single biggest thing you'd recommend to teams to start to do well? It isn't any Agile practice I've heard of. In fact, it's one I don't hear about very much. And it's one I hear in the lean startup community a bit, but it's the get out of the building practice. Now, imagine for a minute that you are Jane Goodall. Now, do people know who Jane Goodall is? You still with me? It's afternoon. I'm tired. Look, Jane Goodall studies primates, and she goes out into the field. She spends a lot of time in Africa. She gathers a lot of data, brings it back, and makes sense of it. Now, when I started with extreme programming in 2000, there was this practice called customer on site. And the idea was that we'd, bring somebody on site that really deeply understood the domain, or somebody that actually was our customer. And I can imagine if an Agile person were to talk to Jane Goodall and notice that this was horribly inefficient, what she was doing. And we've got a practice called chimpanzee on site that will clear all this up. Instead of you wasting all that time going out in the field really understanding chimpanzees, we will bring a chimp to you, and when you've got a question, just turn to the chimpanzee and ask them. Look, don't do that. That's not helping. A lot of what we're doing, when things really start to go well, I find that just showing up, just being where people are, makes a big difference. When I go through my photo stream over the years, I see lots and lots of pictures that look horribly boring. There are lots of vacation photos that I remember a lot of detail about, but because I was there. But there are pictures of people at work. This is a guy at a bank in Wilmington, and we weren't quite getting what he was talking about the way he did things every day. So we arranged to meet him first thing in the morning when he did his work and watched him do it. These guys are at a CVS pharmacy, and has anybody ever seen in a CVS pharmacy, there are those pictures, those Kodak kiosks where you can bring a camera in or put a USB stick in it and print out a picture. Now, the tall guy on the right is the product manager for that kiosk, and he has been for years. He knows a lot about his product. He's watched a lot of usability testing. He's done a lot of formal interviews with his users, but he manages backlogs. There's a huge amount of requirements or needs for change in the product. But in working with him, the first thing we did was drag him out of the office to actually watch people use his kiosk. The guy on the left is a user experience person, a researcher. The guy standing back behind is the lead engineer on this team. And the really short person with white hair does not work on their team. She's been trying to print a photograph for the last hour, and they've been watching her. And they spent the afternoon watching lots of people do this. And, well, at the end of the day, the guy on the right came back saying, "This has been the worst day of my life. I've never realized how much pain I've been inflicting on people." But he said, "This has also been the best day of this has been a great day because now I know how easy it is to actually go and see this, and it makes a big difference." I will promise you, you will not prioritize the backlog the same way if you've looked your customers in the eye. And that was a lesson learned for me long before Agile. I've got lots of pictures of talking with people as they use an application that they're working with, and they're pretty animated about the way they do things. That lady manages this dress shop in Nordstrom, or this high-end dress place in Nordstrom. I built a lot of software for brick-and-mortar retailers, and I've got lots of pictures of these guys hard at work. This guy is a stock portfolio manager. For the company we were working with in San Francisco, I showed up, and we were hard at work building the team was hard at work building lots of stuff for these guys. And I said, can we talk to these guys? We really need to understand how they're working. If this is going to be valuable to them when we're done, I want to figure out what a day in their life is like. I'm not really getting it from this backlog. Can we talk to them? And they said, well, they're really busy people. They get to the office really early in the morning, and well, we can arrange a time for you to talk to them, but it may be next week, maybe the week after. I said, well, where do they work? And they said, well, they're down on the third floor, but you can't go there again because they're so busy. Can we just go down and see what their work environment looks like? And they said, no, you definitely can't do that. And well, we just wanted to get a couple pictures to help us remember it. They said, you definitely cannot do that because there's a lot of legal ramifications about that, and so don't do that. And we said, okay. We waited until they left. We went over to the elevator, hit the third floor. We went down, and sure enough, there's a lot of security. We can't get through. We're kind of looking outside the window. Somebody comes up and said, are you trying to get in? And we said, yeah. And they said, well, come on in. So we walked in. We stood behind and kind of watched, and well, this was one of the first guys to turn around and look at us and say, what are you guys doing here? Well, we're working on the new portfolio management system, and we just wanted to see how you guys worked. And he said, well, come here, sit down, and let me show you how this goes. And he sat, and other people came over, and we sat with a bunch of other people, and after a couple hours, we really got a feel for the way they work and what their problems were. And in the end, this guy says, wow, this is great. Nobody ever comes down here to visit us. And, well, it makes a difference when we explain things back to stakeholders and others, and oddly, a lot of the stakeholders and others haven't been down there to watch them either. Well, we sound smarter, and actually we sound like the ones who actually care about the way these guys work. Now, if I go through my slide deck, I've got lots of these. And one last one, and let me plow through here. Hey, when do I end? Is it 50? Oh, I'm in good shape. I'm never early. I'm going to drag this out then. Look, this was Kodak again. They asked, Kodak is still a company. They're still trying to make a profit. They're trying to work on a lot of new products. And they asked me to go to India to work with their teams in India. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. I cannot tell them they need to be talking with their customers, and they're going to send me to work with an outsourced development team. Their customers aren't here. But happily, they were fairly smart. Their customers were in India. The guy on the right is a product manager. The guy on the left designs portable printers, and the guy in the middle uses portable printers. Uh, these guys are, well, is it the Taj India Hotel, or do people know that hotel? Yeah, in Mumbai, that's correct. Yeah, that's the one where the terrorist junk was a long time ago. And out in the water out there is a big monument, and there are lots of these guys that take photographs of families, and for 30 rupees you can get a photograph of your family, and he's got to take the picture and print it right there for you, and this is what these guys do all day long. We go there, watch these guys work, talk to them, and well, these guys from Kodak are heroes because, as you might expect, nobody comes down to visit them, and they're thrilled that people are interested in them. In the end, these guys make friends. There are a lot of people that want to help, that want to say something about the software. Now, that's one last point here and one comment that sticks in my head. This is Atik. He works for a company called Edmunds.com. Has anybody ever used Edmunds.com to buy anything or look up car information before? Look, Atik is in charge of the analytics group at Edmunds.com. He is good at pulling analytics from their site and knowing exactly what people do. Edmunds had been doing that for years. This picture's fairly old now, 4 or 5 years old, but when walking into work with them, the first thing we did was put a big workshop together. First thing we did was schedule a whole bunch of people that actually had used their site to help them buy cars. And, well, we asked the people at Edmunds to talk to them because they hadn't done that in a long time. So that's their team. That's Atik's team, and the lady in front does not work on their team. She bought a car recently. At the end of this day, I remember what Atik said. He said, look, I'm the analytics guy. It's up until now that I've been confident I can tell you precisely what people do on our site. But it's not until today that I never realized I could tell you why. And they've been swimming in data and knowing a lot of what's, but never really why people did what they did, and he just couldn't feel it until they started talking to people. The best solutions come from passionate, motivated people. Empathy is the most powerful motivator that I know. And frankly, when I look back at that whole story thing, that's what we were meant to get. When we tell stories, and I've been telling you stories about those pictures, it's the stories that we remember. It's putting those features into context. And the original idea of that story thing is if we could actually talk to people that had these problems, we'd get more than the requirements. We'd get empathy. And the biggest reason I see that people don't do this or don't do a lot of other stuff is because, well, like the story I was telling about building a stock portfolio management system, it's because we were told not to. We were told it was against the rules. We were told that you should be writing code or you should be doing analysis work or other things like that. And the only 8th step I'm going to give you here is to just do it. Act. Find online an online TED Talk from this guy, Tom Chi. Tom Chi runs user experience at the Google X division of Google, the people that do self-driving cars and Google Glass and other things like that. The talks you'll find from him will talk about them aggressively experimenting, doing a lot of things to help them learn as fast as they possibly can. And he'll make a point that, look, planning and things like that are overrated, thinking is overrated, that doing is the best kind of thinking. At the end of the day, the process for me that trumps Agile is this one. This is short for just do it. And when people, don't want to do the right thing because it's not part of the process or isn't written down or don't want to talk to record stories, to talk about stories, I'll encourage them to act. And the teams that I see that are succeeding are pretty good at that acting thing. Now, this is it. Look, I remember when I started with extreme programming in 2000, and I had a Scrum coach. The guy's name was Rob Mee. Has anybody heard of a company called Pivotal Labs before? Yes, no, yeah, a lot of people heard of Pivotal Labs. Okay, so Rob Mee, after this company, went on to found Pivotal Labs. But Rob Mee was my coach. He was a scary guy to sit with, and really a white-hot developer. He knew what he was doing, and when I paired with Rob, I was going to learn something, whether I wanted to or not. But at 5 o'clock, Rob would roll around and tell people, stop it, stop working. Either get out of the office or play Half-Life with the rest of us. It was that long ago. If you're doing this and working hard, it's hard work. I remember when sprint in Scrum, I've heard a lot of Scrum people say that, look, you can't sprint all the time, it's a long distance thing. But I remember when we were doing these things, we would sprint and we'd take a day and not do anything. We'd let those planning meetings and discussions and review take a whole day, and we'd get a chance to relax, get a chance to shut down. Because if you are going to sprint, if you are going to work hard, you need to relax hard too. And the teams that I see performing well know how to take 5. Look, if you're doing this thing right, this stuff is exhausting. Get out, take time, and then get back in there. Now, the points I wanted to make, the whole talk was kind of founded by talking with the guy that I started with, and me getting kind of lost believing my own crap about all the practices that I teach, and him reminding me that, well, those practices are good, but it's the basics, getting back to the basics, that made the biggest difference for us. And when I think back to when things were really working for me, Agile in 2001 to 2005, well, it wasn't nearly as complicated as Agile development is today. It was fairly simple, but what made it work? We're doing a little bit better job at all these simple things. And with that, I'm going to call it. Do we have time for any questions? We have 6 minutes, according to I know. Did I leave you anything that you could ask questions about? So please, yeah, thank you.